Hey geeks, my name is Bran. Welcome to the Geek XP. Today I have a movie review for the new Fantastic Four movie. So for any of you who have been paying attention to the internet for the past couple weeks, you probably noticed how the Fantastic Four reboot film has become the most recent punching bag for everyone on the internet. This is going to be a more summed up review. For those of you who want to see a more in-depth synopsis and review of the whole film, check out the Geek XP's Facebook page. I'm going to be posting the full written review that I've come up with for the film there, so if you guys want to see something more in-depth, definitely check that out. This film surprised me a bit in that the first half of it, like the first act, is actually not bad. I found it actually kind of entertaining. The characters that are getting set up and we're getting introduced to are very layered and interesting and unique in their own special ways. We start with a young Reed and Ben and how they come together, and eventually Reed ends up going to the Baxter Institute to work with Sue and Johnny Storm, Franklin Storm, and also Victor Von Doom, which is interesting. Reed's character is, as you might expect, he's a very intelligent scientist. He's very excited about this new exploration into another dimension and teleporting people there and exploring it himself. He goes at it with this almost childlike energy and excitement, which is very endearing, I found, and I think Miles Teller did a great job of making Reed Richards very likable. Victor Von Doom, played by Toby Kebbell, is sort of an interesting contrast to Reed Richards in that the way they've had Victor play in this film is to be more of a darker reflection of Reed, which is appropriate. They're both intellectuals, and it's interesting to see how instead of Reed's childlike energy and excitement about this scientific project, Victor comes at it with this almost predatory hunger, which is very creepy. The way these characters are sort of parallel opposites to each other, if that's a term, is very interesting to show how there's such a fine line between this sort of good and evil version of the same person. And I think that's a good thing to have in a villain, to show how close the hero is to becoming that if they stray from the path a little bit. Sort of like Sith Jedi sort of thing going on there. So I thought that was neat. Sue and Johnny Storm relationship, both with each other and with their father Franklin, is really organic and nuanced, and it feels like an actual family. While they still love each other, there's still some friction there. They don't get along perfectly, just like brothers and sisters don't get along necessarily perfectly well all the time. So I really like that. And the way the actors played off each other was really, really nice. They didn't feel forced. The dialogue between them felt natural and things that actual people would say to each other. Kate Mara plays Sue Storm, and she gives her this more reserved and quiet person. She enjoys listening to music while she works, as she listens for patterns, and that's the sort of thing that she studies. And we get this really focused and intellectual woman through her portrayal of Sue, which I liked, and something that this film did not do that I was super happy about. One was they don't sexualize Sue Storm, make her a sex object for the audience to ogle or laugh at. Unlike the 2005 Fantastic Four, which very much did that with the Invisible Woman. You know, she would have to turn invisible but didn't have her suit on, so she would take her clothes off, and then she would accidentally become visible again, and she's naked in front of everyone. And it's demeaning and it's gross and it's not alright to do, especially to your main, one of your hero characters. So I'm super glad that they broke that cliche. Another thing with Sue that I liked is they did not force her romance with Reed in this film. The two have this very organic feeling and realistic friendship that forms, and you can see a romance starting to blossom, but they don't force them into love in this first film, which is a great thing. Instead of spending a lot of these time with these characters forcing them into a couple, the movie instead focuses on their personalities and characteristics as individuals, which I think is a good thing in this establishing these characters. Johnny Storm, instead of being, he's a little cocky, but not quite as douchey as Chris Evans, Human Torch in the 2005 film franchise. Michael B. Jordan brings this sort of happy-go-lucky feel to the character while he's still, sure of himself and knows what he can do and thinks he can push boundaries and things like the Human Torch should. He's very relatable. Finally, Jamie Bell playing Ben Grimm makes this, does a good job of bringing the sort of, I don't want to say simple, but grounded and sort of blunt personality that is Ben Grimm, which just makes sense because the Thing is figuratively and literally the Fantastic Four's rock. He's their anchor. And so he sort of brings that. Unfortunately, we don't see a lot of him. When Reed goes off to the Baxter Institute to work with the other scientists on this teleportation project, Ben is left behind, and so I feel like there's a missed opportunity for a lot of character development there and seeing how he interacts with these intellectuals, because he's not as smart, and that's not bad, it's just his character. He's not supposed to be as smart as the rest of these guys. So the first act, we establish these characters, and it's really fun to watch them work together, and I want to see them succeed in this teleportation project. As this first act is wrapping up and they go to this other dimension, which by the way looks really cool. They have these like rivers of energy, these epic looking mountainscapes and this stormy sky, very cool to look at. And I was sitting there realizing, like as a sci-fi film, if this was just like an original concept that was sort of based on Fantastic Four, but no one ever really like confirmed it, it would have made a really cool sci-fi thriller. These young scientists discover this new dimension and travel there, and shenanigans ensue, whether it's monsters or mutations or something like that. And it would have been really cool, but as a superhero film, I'm sitting there 45 minutes into the film, and it's not a superhero movie yet. I'm not thrilled. The characters aren't being pushed that far yet in terms of, in your typical superhero film fashion. You introduce your characters, they get their powers, or they start getting into the superhero thing. We see how they adjust to that, their complications, where they might misstep, and by the end we get into our climactic battle where they're forced to take everything they've learned and apply it into being a hero. This movie definitely takes its time getting to that point, and unfortunately, after this first act, where afterwards they get exposed to this energy and they all get their powers, when they teleport back, there's this explosion that exposes Sue to the radiation, and Victor gets left behind in the other dimension when he gets splashed with this extra-dimensional goopy acid stuff and disappears off a cliff. It's very dramatic. After that ends, the whole movie starts falling apart. These interesting characters that we've been introduced to, that we like, we've seen how unique they are from each other and, have an idea of who they are. This is the moment where you would want to see how they cope and deal with the realization that, one, their lives are never going to be exactly the same again. And two, that, for people like Ben, are changed forever on the outside and they can't just interact with people normally. But they decide to skip over this entirely. They gloss over an entire year and sort of cover it with, this is what has happened. Ben works for the military now as a thug. Johnny's right behind him, willing to use his powers for the military. Sue is more of like, we should, try to find a cure for this. And before that year skip, Reed escapes this maximum security facility run by the military where they were being held after their mutations. He has no control over his powers. He's like still fully stretched, and he can't quite unstretch himself. He finds Ben, but he's like, I can't help you right now, but I'll be back. And then somehow escapes. And then a year goes by, and he's off somewhere. He made himself this slinky suit so he can control his powers a little bit more, and he's trying to make a portal for himself to go back and try to find a cure for their condition. And these characters seem pretty much the same, except Ben's a little angrier, obviously. But they're pretty much the same. They haven't grown at all, and we haven't seen them grow at all. We've entirely skipped this huge potential for character development to see these people that we've come to enjoy in the first half go through this harrowing process of coming to terms with their new reality. Reed then is forced to help them recreate the technology to teleport back. The government sends a group of scientists and explorers out there. They find Victor, who is now melded with his environmental suit, so he looks properly Doom-like. He took the flag that they planted and turned it into a cape because it's now green and dusty. They bring him back, and he promptly starts killing everyone in heinous and terrifying ways in the name of protecting his world from humanity, because evil. His powers are not really defined in the movie, which is something I sort of have an issue with. In the comic books, Doom has always been technology and sorcery, and while I get that for some reason these movie creators don't want to do that, they shy away a lot from sorcery because it's not realistic. But at the same time, we're in a sci-fi film, and our willing suspension of disbelief is totally like, we're willing to accept this is happening. Instead, they give him these amorphous energy / matter manipulation. He drops a ceiling on some people, blows open a door, causes one guy to like burn up and then explode, and then just sort of like walking through hallways, deflecting bullets, making people's brains literally explode out of their head, like he's literally blowing people's minds. And then he goes back through the teleporter and then uses his powers to create a black hole that's sucking Earth through into the other dimension through the teleporter. So they establish he's just stupidly powerful with no real reason, which I think is a mistake. I think it's good for the audience to have a semblance of what the villain's powers are, so that we can maybe try to, as we're watching, think like, how can our heroes beat this? If he's just amorphously godlike, it's just like, okay, well, there's no hope. because when the Fantastic Four to go show up and fight him, he's just going to blow their brains out of the back of their heads, right? No, it's not the case. And what sort of punctuates how silly this is, showing him to have just, he can do whatever, is they go to the other dimension through the portal. Sue makes a force field and they fly through. Johnny just flies through a wormhole and survives, which is whatever. And they fight Doom individually at first. They fight him using their skills they learned from the abridged book of ninja fighting. And instead of using all these crazy energy powers he showed before, he decides to fight them with rocks. Yes. Of all the powers that Dr. Doom now has, he decides to throw rocks at the Fantastic Four. Human Torch flying at you, throwing fireballs, throw lots of little rocks on him. Invisible Woman flying around in an invisible force field, throw lots of little rocks at her so you can see where the field is, and then hit her with those rocks. The thing running at you, gonna punch you in the throat, bigger rocks at him. And then he uses his powers to dismantle Reed's slinky suit so he can't use his powers, but then he sort of like wills himself to bring his limbs back together and he punches Doom into a hole. They get the team to fight together, and they actually use some cool combination powers, but this whole fight scene takes like 5 minutes, maybe 10, and it's just underwhelming. Superhero films, their big thing is how thrilling they are to watch, and this climactic battle scene is not that. It's so short. All the dialogue in this second half and in this fight especially is dry, filled with this bogus pseudoscience, and the performances just aren't as convincing. In the first half of the film, it feels like genuine lines spoken by real people to each other. And in the second half, we just totally disregard that for really dry performances with really bogus lines, and it's so disappointing. They defeat Doom, throw him through this black hole, and he sort of falls apart. They travel back to Earth, and the military's like, oh, well, thank you for everything that you did. We'd like to continue our partnership with you. And they basically bitch slap the government saying, nope, we're going to do what we want. We own everything that we do. We can do whatever we want, and you can't stop us. And the government's like, okay, well, let's give you this super secret facility and staff so you can do science. And I don't know. I don't buy the U.S. government allowing, 1, superhumans or metahumans, 2, teenage metahumans to basically run this whole facility. After what Doom did and getting powers from this source, I feel like the government would be a little iffy about trusting these teens with this much responsibility and power. One of the reasons that maybe if they were adults in the film, we wouldn't have to change the actors. I think the actors are great, but maybe if they were just playing as adults instead of adults playing as teenagers, I could maybe accept more that the government is willing to give them this responsibility. But I mean, I feel like the climactic battle of this film is very telling of the whole second half. Is that it's clustered, everything is happening so fast. The characters don't seem really invested into any of it. When Franklin Storm dies, when Victor kills him, and Sue and Johnny are like outside, like, no, they don't seem really upset. Like, Johnny gets mad, but like there's no tears. They don't feel like they're really distraught, and it's just sort of that dry, claustrophobic feeling this whole second half has, which is really disappointing. Yeah. I think the overall failure of this film pretty much puts a stop to any theories or ideas that Fox was going to do a Fantastic Four X-Men shared universe, since X-Men right now is their only real successful superhero franchise. Deadpool looks promising and might be their second. I don't think they're going to drown the X-Men along with Fantastic Four. But here's the thing. None of it matters. Whether this film was mildly successful, pretty successful, or the flop that it was, it's entirely irrelevant, because Disney owns Marvel Entertainment. They run it now. And Disney is a business juggernaut. It will eventually get the rights back to all of its titles. Whether it's working coordination like Marvel is working with Sony now to have Spider-Man involved in the cinematic universe, or if they just buy it back because they can't make a film. This film feels like the rushed production of Fox being like, we need to make another Fantastic Four movie or we'll lose the rights to it, and Marvel will get it back. And so they trusted Josh Trank to make the movie. He was not up to the task. I think there was probably blame on both sides for how it turned out, and this is what we got out of it. If this quickens it being transferred back to Marvel, that's fine with me, because in the long run, Marvel's going to get it back and they're going to reboot it. So whether this film was good or not, it didn't matter. I hope you guys enjoyed this review. Make sure to check out my more fleshed out review and synopsis on the Geek XP's Facebook page. If you guys want to see more reviews like this, make sure you like that, tickle that like button. Not like the like button. You could like it, I don't know. But also make sure to subscribe if you want to see more content like this. And if you guys have your own thoughts on the movie, make sure you post them down in comments below. I'll see you all next time, but for now, you've been awarded some Geek XP. See you later.